Oh, hi! You caught me checking out movies at Blockbuster Video. Speaking of things that were popular in the 90s, let's talk about Venom.
Comic tropes. Comic tropes.
Hello! Welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. There is a trope in comic books where a villain can become so popular that the publisher will decide to spin that character off into his or her own adventures. And it rarely works. I want to talk about the time that Marvel decided to do that with Venom. Venom debuted as a new Spider-Man villain back in 1988 in Amazing Spider-Man issue 300. He was instantly popular, thanks in large part to his exciting design and the artwork by the title's superstar artist Todd McFarlane. Now he has a solo movie that's just debuted, and I've heard several fans argue online that he should be in an R-rated film like Deadpool, Logan, or Blade. But today I want to make the argument that Venom has actually always been a bit of a goofball with a silly attitude, and that his initial popularity led to multiple different creative teams taking the character in strange and bizarre directions and giving him a massively overpowered set of superpowers. Let's start with trying to figure out who actually created Venom. Venom first appears in Amazing Spider-Man 300, written by David Michelinie and illustrated by Todd McFarlane, with a cameo in the previous issue by the same creative team. But of course it can't be that easy, because Venom is really two characters. There's Eddie Brock, the human reporter, and there's the symbiote, an alien from the race of the Klyntar. And if that doesn't intimidate you, let's just start digging a little deeper there. Eddie Brock's history as a reporter was created by Michelinie and McFarlane. He had a huge story revealing the identity of the supervillain Sin Eater, but Peter Parker later debunked it, ruining Brock's career and giving him a personal grudge against Peter. But Brock originally cameoed in Web of Spider-Man issue 18 back in 1986 by Michelinie and artist Marc Silvestri. Although all we see at that point is a human hand that shoves Peter Parker in front of a train, and it doesn't trigger his spider sense. In issue 24 of Web of Spider-Man, a black arm grabs at Spider-Man without triggering his spider sense. That issue was co-written with Len Kaminski and illustrated by Del Barris and Vince Colletta. The alien symbiote's creation is even more complex. The alien, which at first appeared as a living black and white costume, first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 252 back in May of 1984. That issue was plotted by Roger Stern, written by Tom DeFalco, and illustrated by Ron Frenz. Writer John Byrne has claimed on his website that he had the idea for a living costume when he was working on Iron Fist, and spoke with Stern about it, who asked if he could use the idea. But after plotting issue 252 of Amazing Spider-Man, he left the title. The origin of the black costume was shown in Marvel Superhero Secret Wars issue 8 from December of 1984. That was written by Jim Shooter and illustrated by Mike Zeck. But the creation of that costume backs up even further. The black and white design of the costume was conceived by Mike Zeck and Rick Leonardi. The idea to go in that direction may have been influenced by the idea to change Spider-Woman to a black and white costume, but her title was canceled before the idea was implemented. One definite source of inspiration was Jim Shooter buying the idea for a new Spider-Man costume from fan Randy Schuler, who sold his idea to Marvel in 1982 for $200. So a lot of people touched different aspects that all factored into Venom's creation. Writer David Michelinie wrote to Wizard magazine once, and he argued that he had created and written the idea for Venom before Todd McFarlane was ever assigned, and that while Todd's visuals definitely made the character popular, that he, the writer, was solely responsible for the creation of Venom. Now, Eric Larson, the artist who followed Todd McFarlane on Amazing Spider-Man, has argued in public that the character of Eddie Brock wasn't especially deep and that the alien symbiote already existed. So the popularity and the creation of Venom should really be all thanks to Todd McFarlane. It should be noted that Eric Larson has never really been a fan of Venom, and that while he illustrated him many times, he's publicly said he doesn't really care for that character. Anyway, bottom line, good luck definitively stating who created Venom. Regardless of all this, with Todd McFarlane's superstar visuals behind him, Venom was a breakout character, one of Spider-Man's most exciting enemies in years. Venom appeared in 6 story arcs between 1988 and 1993 as Spider-Man's opponent, but by the last 2, he was being moved in a direction where he was more of an anti-hero than a full villain. David Michelinie had plans to kill off Eddie Brock and move the symbiote onto new characters, but Marvel Editorial said the character was too popular and wanted to spin him off into his own adventures. So instead, by issue 360, a story began to create a more psychotic version of Venom named Carnage. Venom moved into a role where he teamed up with Spider-Man against Carnage and eventually decided to leave Spider-Man alone and go off on his own adventures. One thing worth noting is Venom's personality and his stories. It's all fairly goofy. Venom talks a big game, discussing eating brains, but he's really all talk. He swings around making dark but silly statements because he is a dark reflection of Spider-Man. Same powers, similar sarcastic demeanor, but lacking the sense of responsibility. Eddie Brock's defining characteristic in these early stories is his inability to take responsibility for the way his career went and placing that blame on Peter Parker. Similarly, the symbiote was using Peter and forcing him to go out at night and making him angry, so Peter rejected it. The symbiote can't accept that, and together, the symbiote and Brock, as Venom, aim that anger at Peter. But behind the scenes, Marvel was looking to capture market share. They had an aggressive plan of releasing tons of new titles to sort of crowd out their competition for actual shelf space in comic book stores. And Venom was incredibly popular. So they actually decided, hey, let's launch a Venom comic book. There were 2 problems with this. One, Venom's only real motivation up to this point had been his animosity towards Spider-Man. So if they take that away, they were almost starting from scratch with the character. And second, instead of, say, a 60-issue run by one creative team, what they decided to do was a rotating series of different creative teams over 17 consecutive mini-series. So you had a lot of different opinions on which direction the character should go. In the Spider-Man title, Michelinie's plan to kill off Eddie Brock was nixed. So we had Venom birth the symbiote Seed, which bonded with serial killer Cletus Cassidy and created the psychopathic Carnage. This more evil take on Venom freed him up to go on his own adventures, kicking things off with a hollow foil cover for his first miniseries, Lethal Protector. One interesting side effect of all these different creative teams was that they all kept building up Venom's powers. Now, when he debuted, he already had all of Spider-Man's powers, plus the symbiote suit could change its appearance to create new versions of clothes to sort of help Eddie Brock camouflage himself, as well as it didn't trigger Spider-Man's spider sense. Those are a great set of powers. He was even stronger than Spider-Man because Eddie Brock was stronger than Peter Parker, so it just sort of elevated his strength levels. Before Venom spun off into his own titles, he had started using his shape-shifting clothes to look like different people, used his suit to go into victims' orifices, grabbed his enemies with new appendages, and even gained the ability to breathe underwater. You know, just thinking about it, hosting the symbiote must have been pretty difficult. We should ask our friend Spider-Man what it was like, since he used to be the host of the symbiote. Hey Spider-Man, what was the worst part of hosting the Venom symbiote?
Well, honestly, the thing that freaks me out the most about Venom was not how big and scary he was, or even that he knew my secret identity. It's that I used to wear him. That means he touched my balls, Chris. I didn't know it was alive. I thought it was just a fancy suit. I was going commando on that thing for weeks. And the only other men to do that are a licensed physician and Skip Westcott. You want to talk about a sick-minded villain? That guy makes Venom look like a Girl Scout.
Moving on. In Venom's third miniseries, The Madness, with art by Kelly Jones and a story by Ann Nesenti, Venom gets beaten up by the Juggernaut and falls into an area contaminated by a sentient virus. The virus offers to cure Venom in exchange for bonding, so Venom bonds to a third entity, grows a couple more arms and a few tiny heads, and is now able to fight the strongest character in the Marvel Universe. He ultimately kicks out the virus after a follow-up fight where he holds his own against the Juggernaut. A couple months later, Venom went up against the only character that could be stronger, the Hulk. In the one-shot comic, Venom hears on the news about a supervillain named Dr. Bad Vibes that threatens San Francisco with an earthquake. After a big one hits, he saves some bystanders and then encounters the Hulk. They engage in a brief fight where Venom's speed and agility help balance things out until the Hulk uses a giant thunderclap to knock out Venom. Because Venom is so powerful, he can really only get taken out by weapons. In fact, in the Spider-Man comics, Spider-Man would really only be able to defeat Venom by using fire or sound, two weaknesses that the symbiote had. And later, as his powers grew, the writers of the Venom title decided to add to a way to take Venom down a notch by saying that chocolate pacifies the symbiote. Silly, but actually kind of also made sense, because Venom, at that point, was ridiculously powerful. We'll get there in a second. Let's get back to his fight with the Hulk. Now that Venom and the Hulk, who at this point has the clever mind of Dr. Bruce Banner, are on the same page, they head to the local news station and threaten Dr. Bad Vibes. They do this by acting out a dated Saturday Night Live Hans and Franz sketch. This works, and Dr. Bad Vibes calls the television station, allowing Hulk to track him down. And then Venom and Hulk learn that it's a weak nobody who just pretended to be a supervillain, and the actual earthquake was a complete coincidence. The entire story is a waste of everyone's time, and the artwork by Jim Craig is hot garbage. A year later, Venom got into his silliest fight in the miniseries Carnage Unleashed by writer Larry Hama and artist Andrew Wildman, who were working together on G.I. Joe at this time. In the story, Venom goes up against his spawn, Carnage. Carnage's plan is to put some of his symbiote goo in an online video game and murder people that play it. He and Venom ultimately use their powers to infuse modem cables and therefore literally enter the internet. They then have a fight in the internet that is projected on the giant screens in Times Square. And obviously that is not how the internet works, but it was 1995 and a lot of the readers didn't really know everything about the internet. It was new, we were all using those terrible AOL discs, listening to the phone lines as the modem connected, dealing with incredibly slow speeds. There wasn't a lot of great content back in those days, but I can tell you that we all pretty much knew that alien superheroes and supervillains couldn't just touch a cable and enter the internet, and if they did, why would it be broadcast on advertising screens in a public space? It didn't make any sense. So Venom at this point was pretty much near the peak of his power levels, but they ended up going a little bit further. Yeah, they made Venom so powerful that he literally beats up Superman. Literally. Yes, in 1996, Marvel teamed up with their competitor DC Comics to release a crossover comic called All Access. It featured a character they jointly owned, Access, who could travel between the two universes. In the story, the dimensional walls become thin and characters cross over. In issue 1, writer Ron Mars forgot that Venom was currently a good guy and has him beat up Superman. Like, Venom just wins a fight in no uncertain terms. In fact, Superman then teams up with Spider-Man, and Venom easily beats up both of them. It's only thanks to new character Access picking up a sonic cannon that the two superheroes are saved. So yeah, Venom got so powerful that he could literally defeat Superman. That was pretty much the peak of Venom's powers. And by this point, with the rotating creative teams, I think that audiences basically got burned out on the character. The miniseries stopped, and Venom was given a bit of a breather. In fact, the next time he factors into the Marvel Comics significantly, it's really just the symbiote. They end up ultimately moving the symbiote onto a different Spider-Man supervillain, the Scorpion. And he pretty much looks and acts the same way, but maybe a little bit more psychotic. And I think that people's memories of Venom acting a little bit more violent and psychotic tend to come a little bit more from that era, where the symbiote is on Mac Gargan, the Scorpion. Ultimately, I do still like parts of Venom. I think, first of all, he does have a great look. I think that there was more they could have done with the Eddie Brock character if they didn't overuse him so much early on. My personal favorite version of the Venom symbiote in Marvel Comics stories, though, is actually the version that writer Rick Remender came up with, where he put him on Spider-Man's best friend, Flash Thompson. In those stories, the US government gets a hold of the symbiote, and they put it on Peter Parker's friend and US Army veteran Flash Thompson, who had lost his legs fighting for our country. He uses the symbiote to become Agent Venom, and the military's idea is to only allow it on Flash for limited engagements. I like the bond that those two form, and the amazing visuals that Tony Moore designed, and where the character went, so I definitely recommend looking for those issues. As far as the Eddie Brock version goes, I think it has a lot of potential, but I think that he became popular so quickly that he became overused, and that really diminished the threat of the villain if he keeps showing up but keeps getting defeated by Spider-Man every time. And then, of course, shortly after getting defeated a bunch of times, they sort of turn him into a new version of the character where he's trying to be a good guy. And again, that could have worked, but I think that the multiple different creative teams didn't really benefit the character. I think Venom needed a guiding hand to send him on a consistent character arc for a while if it was going to become a character that we could all really invest in and care about. But you know what? Your mileage may vary. If you really love the Eddie Brock Venom, I get it. It was popular for a reason. I'm probably the weirdo for just thinking that he was more of a goofball. But I tried to support my argument with some of the storylines where I sort of got my opinions from. Alright, all that said, let's take a look at what kind of fan art I got this week. I got 7 pieces of fan art this week, starting with Adam Wheeler, who envisions me as a Liefeld-esque 1990s superhero. And Adam has an Instagram account here. George Giparu sends in this awesome piece, and here's a link to him actually drawing it. Kevin Freer provided this art where apparently I met the Watcher. There's also a link to Kevin's website. Jason Perro sends in a piece inspired by the anime and manga Fist of the North Star. I'd probably have my head explode in seconds in that world. Jesse Pike delivers this incredibly fun and colorful version of me doing my show, and here's some social media links for Jesse. Maciek sends in 2 pieces. From the email, it sounds like Maciek is from Poland, and he has a Facebook portfolio listed below. And finally, here is a piece by Taylor Peterson, which features a look at my relationship with Infotron and Infotron's relationship with my water heater. Thank you for so much fan art. That is amazing. So I wrote down like 7 numbers here on pieces of paper. I'm going to toss them into this bag. If you want a chance to have your artwork shown and maybe win a gachapon that I picked up in Japan, just send your artwork to comictropes@gmail.com and you'll have a chance to win. So I'm just sort of fluffing it about, reaching back in and out, trying to pick a random winner. It is number 2. Can you see that? 2. All right, let's see. Who was number 2? All right, number 2 was George. I'm going to reach in and choose a prize for you, George. George, you are getting this gachapon, which seems to be a cat, some sort of a cute cat that can latch onto something. I don't know if it's like it latches onto a pen or your finger or what, but The Japanese love cute kittens, so that's a gachapon that comes straight from Japan that I picked up. I'll send that out your way, George. Thank you, everyone, for sending in the fan art. It's always exciting. Speaking of artwork, I am partaking in Inktober this year. So every single day in October, I am live streaming on my channel for at least an hour. I wish I could tell you that it's at a consistent time, but due to my irregular work schedule, I always get different hours and work different days of each week. I can't commit to a specific time. Sorry, but they do all get archived. I'm drawing every day and just thought that that would be something extra and fun. I want to grow as an artist. I want to try to collect a little ad revenue because one of my cats had a very, very expensive vet bill. So I am being a little selfish there, but I also love having the opportunity to live chat with all of you. And I also want to give a sincere thank you to my personal favorite Spider-Man, Godzilla Mendoza. That was Godzilla Mendoza as Spider-Man. He has an amazing YouTube channel. I have it on good authority that he's considering some sort of a review or discussion of the Venom movie. I know that that's something he's been talking about on social media. He's put out a couple videos lately with the new Spider-Man PS4 game out and stuff. He focuses a lot on Spider-Man video games, Spider-Man media, but he's got a really amazing depth of comic books in general, and I think his channel's great. It's got more subscribers than me, but if you don't know about it, Godzilla Mendoza has a great channel. All right, folks, I think that'll do it for this week. I hope you look. Yeah, okay, I guess I'm getting tired. I was going to say, I hope you liked this episode and looking at some of Venom's weirder history in the past. All right, yeah, history usually is in the past. Okay, so I've sort of lost coherence. Sorry about that. And next week, I'll be back to talk about more tropes in comics. I hear that those comics actually do have tropes. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, sharing. I really appreciate all that. And until next time, keep reading comics.